Welcome to Murphy, Sam, and Jody after the show. And in case you haven't heard by now, if you've missed a few podcasts, we're on vacation through July the 19th. We'll be back on the 19th. But we're mixing and matching after the show podcast. So we actually do have some episodes that we're doing for you while we're on vacation. And we're also doing some ICYMI moments for you in case you missed it moments for the After the Show podcast. So enjoy both, and we'll see you back again on the 19th. Welcome to Murphy, Sam, and Jody after the show. So this one's going to be a little bit different today. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to share a story that has been alluded to on the show for many years, but has never been described in detail before. And
Loch Ness Monster? Sasquatch?
Bigfoot.
That's one. It's the real reason that I quit, drinking. And then the other thing is maybe this will be helpful to somebody who's either struggling through this.
It will be. Every time both of you talk about it, even just a little bit, people feel like, oh, wow, I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, right. So, I mean,
Totally.
if this helps a family member or a friend or even the person who is experiencing it, then, then good. So, are you ready? So I want to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
It was a hot summer day in July of
it was May.
Oh, no, not that
10
far
years
back.
ago today.
Right. I was going back to birth, but yeah.
Oh, Lordy.
So, yeah, today, May the 19th, it was 2011, and that was the last time that I had an alcoholic drink. And the reason for that is because everything kind of culminated on the evening of May the 19th.
It's the formal version.
With something that I always thought that I was going to be able to, resist, which apparently I didn't. And so realize I grew up in a household of where I had an alcoholic father who did stop drinking in 1990 and was dry through the remainder of his life until he passed this year, 30 years. And I learned a lot from going through that process with him because obviously we did, conjoint and all the family stuff with him and 12-step. We went through all that with him. And then I've gone through it a couple of times in my life with friends and then some other family members, Jody, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
some of my family members.
Yeah. And so, come 2011, early that year, without me really realizing it, that's when we joke about it a lot. I was making margaritas at home.
Tuesday
night. I was
night.
having fun, man.
If you remember, April 1st of that year was my wedding.
I do. And we showed
you
up.
You showed up with a pitcher of margaritas.
That's
Murphy
right.
Did you make them at home and bring them to Sam's wedding? Yeah.
Or did I make them there?
I think you made them there because they had to be made fresh.
Oh.
You brought all the ingredients and you made them in Sam's kitchen.
You only showed up with a half a pitcher.
But those were good. But as things would happen that year. It was one of those where I would have a casual drink every night. Loved wine, things like that. But hard alcohol was really the problem, and I didn't know that. I was always aware that it could be an issue for me at some point in my life because my dad and a lineage of that. There were many others in my family that also struggled with alcohol and went down very different paths in some cases. My dad lost his he didn't lose his job, but he could have. The company had put him on basically a probation because he was drinking morning, noon, and night. It had not gotten that far for me. However, what did happen to me is the reason that I stopped because I was, as Jody can tell you, I was making mixed drinks pretty much every night when I got home, wasn't I? In the last couple, and it accelerated. I wasn't doing that. It's weird. If you rewound to 2010,
it was a weekend thing.
It was a weekend thing, or the occasional if we went out or something like that. But for whatever reason, it started to progress to where it was something I was looking forward to every night, and that's what I was doing. So anyway, the reason I'm explaining all that is because I was kind of aware of it, but I didn't think that there was a problem that was going on.
I knew that it was happening because it was a few nights before this night that I was bathing Phoebe, and you walked in. We tell the story and we laugh about it, and you walked in, and I'm like, I'm up to my elbows in suds and kids and stuff to do, and we have this early morning life, and I'm in it, and you walk in to the bathroom like Frank Sinatra with 2 drinks in your hand, like, hey, I made something from scratch. Would you want to try it? I think it was a Bloody Mary. And I love that. And I was like, no, thanks. It's 9 o'clock.
Wasn't that the one where you said he walked in and said, "I think this is the best one I've made yet"?
Yeah. Something like that. Something like that. But what I'm saying is that I saw it too, but it did not occur to me that it was a problem because you also still got up every morning and came to work, and we did what we. You know what I mean? It didn't. Because it snuck up on me too.
Well, I wasn't drinking to that point every night when I was drinking at home. The problem was when I would go out, I was really. I always had the issue with the overindulging, especially if it was parties or something like that. And for years it was like that. And it's not like it was happening once a week. That was every, couple of months or whatever it was.
Halloween the year before that was the story.
And you didn't like a lot of those moments, which I get now. So anyway, fast forward back to May the 19th, 2011. It was the second time in that week that I'd actually gone out with a coworker of ours and to the same bar. We'd met some people. We were just doing the kind of after work stuff. And so I was having the bartender make my favorite margaritas, but for whatever reason, I was ordering them as doubles and, instead of the just like you need that much tequila,
Wow.
And so, earlier that week, I wasn't feeling any pain. You know what I mean? I had to kind of hang around for a while before I could, go home. But that, I think it was a Thursday.
It was a Thursday night.
Yeah, so it was a Thursday night.
I know for sure it was a Thursday night.
Yeah. But that night, I think our coworker actually left, and for whatever reason, I was still there at the bar, and I think I was on my fourth or fifth margarita at that point, which I jokingly called margarita. It was really nothing more than watered down tequila with a little bit of salt, and I talked to Jody, and Jody wanted me to bring a Diet Coke home, and that was probably 2 hours beforehand, and I was
you
really
had told me
hammered.
you were coming home, and can I bring you anything? I'm like, sure, I'll take a Diet Coke because we were out or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a weird
So,
request.
for whatever crazy reason, that evening, which is the reason you have to say that you're powerless over alcohol, I decided to get behind the wheel. And when I did, it's not like Jody and I live that far from this place, but it should have been an easy turn out. To just go home was straight shot home. But when I got in the car, I guess I just lost my way, whatever it was that was going on, and I was driving and driving and driving. And I would kind of recognize where I was, and now this is going to get foggy, realize, because I think you know what's coming here. But I turned onto a road that was under construction, and there were cones on the road. It's a 4-lane road, but it was two-way traffic because they had two of the lanes blocked off. And the only thing separating the two lanes were cones. And when I turned into that construction, I turned into the oncoming lane, and didn't really know that. And it's it's in and out. I had faint moments of realizing, God, I'm struggling to get home. Oh my God, And
it's funny. It was not on the way home though. Where you were was not on the way home.
I know. Yeah.
So
anyway, what wound up happening is, sure enough, blue lights start flashing, and I realized, then it's like, okay, I need to pull over, and so I put the brakes on and stopped. But the blue lights were not behind me. They were in front of me. And it was a police officer who was headed straight towards me. I was headed straight towards him. And by the grace of God, I put the brakes on. And he got out of his car and was visually, and justifiably upset. And then they did the whole DUI routine and, took me away. And so over the next couple of days, while I was thinking through the process there, knowing that there was going to be a legal, whole bunch of legal stuff to go through, I did the classic alcoholic thing, and I will call that. I don't really like to label myself as that because I do have, an issue with alcohol, which is why I don't drink it anymore. But I wasn't like the guy who was, trashed 24/7. I just wasn't. But it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I'm getting to here is those first 2 days, and Jody can tell you, you were questioning whether I was going to rationalize myself out of that.
Well,
and I was wondering also.
We'll get to my
it's easy
part of
too.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. And so my first thought is, maybe there's a technicality here. Maybe there's some way I can get out of this. And then it just finally hit me. I was talking with a friend of mine, and I mean, I knew that going into it because of this time I'd spent with my father, is that it only takes one time to make that decision. And it could have had unbelievably grave consequences if there hadn't been what I believe is divine intervention, because I was not sober enough to know or do anything. Mm-hmm. And if to me, all it takes is one time to decide that it's okay to get behind the wheel like that. If you're going to make that decision once, then you're going to be prone to make it more times, because it's not really a decision. It's all alcohol blur.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
you had said that you thought you were blacking out at that point.
Yeah. And,
like getting in the car and driving the wrong way home was a blackout issue.
Yeah, because I was in and out. And so if the sober me had been sitting next to me in that place, I probably would have kept myself at the bar. I literally to this day don't know what possessed me to get up and go. And that's also the thing that keeps me from having or wanting to take another
would have come and picked you up.
I know.
I mean, not that you ever really did that. You never really asked me to do that, but I so would have done that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'll spare some of the details on that. I mean, the legal part is what it is, right? It's against the law, and I had to do a year's worth of a pretrial intervention program that helped me to, it was basically saying, okay, you've got to be committed and all in, and then, it's kind of like a plea, I guess, whatever.
It's like you have to
plea
prove.
Bargain. Yeah.
You have to prove to them that you are working.
Right. And then you have a 5-year probationary period, or I did in this case, for it not to go back, on your record. It holds you accountable. And by the way, it was first offense. So I guess they do that for you on first offense. You don't get that option if you've done it more than once. Mm. And but as I went through the program, God, it's so many crazy things. I had to do the safe start thing and blow into the thing to start my vehicle. Blow and hum, actually, because you have to prove that it's a person, not a. You're not using a vacuum cleaner to blow.
Hum? Oh.
Yeah, you have to blow and hum so it knows it's a person.
Like a song or just hum?
And
just hum.
And and again, look, all these programs are different around the country, but I had to go in once a month. They downloaded the photos. There's a camera in there to make sure that it's you that's actually starting the car and all that too, and all that's turned into your,
They know that people are going to push it if they can.
Oh yeah,
and that gets turned into your, your supervisor, your probation officer.
That was such a crazy time.
And then you have to go meet with that person once a week. And I had to do volunteer duties. And all that gave me a lot of time to think. Although, again, by that weekend, I realized this is not, I can't go back and justify this. Laying down next to Phoebe in the bed that evening is where I realized that they could have lost me, or I could have done something that would have altered the family forever. I could have altered that police officer's life forever. I might not have made it out of it. I mean, there are so
hit him head on.
Many things, right, that could have happened that to me, that's not the kind of thing you can take for granted. There's no way that I could, rationalize and go back, oh, wow, it was just one of those things. It was so extreme that I don't know that anything has changed my life or outlook as quickly as that did. Mm-hmm. And the reason, Jody did the Facebook post saying it's 10 years and that it's one day at a time. And I think I mentioned this on the show that it's kind of lofty. I don't want to celebrate because it's, it's a weird pressure thing. It really is. It's one day at a time. It's very complex, but it's not that I don't enjoy the fact that I've made it this far. I love that. And it's not that I don't celebrate that. I'm very happy about, right, exactly, remaining sober and being able to go places and enjoy things and understand that I don't need alcohol to enhance. You always have the moments, Sam, which you probably are familiar with too, where at the beginning you're like, well, but just a beer. I mean, God, what about for all the times that I didn't drink too much and all that? That none of that actually matters at all, as anybody who, goes through AA will tell you. But so some of the things there were a couple of other things I just wanted to mention about that pretrial year. The Safe Start thing was an experience. And every time I caught myself getting frustrated with what an inconvenience it is, I just rewound the movie. That's the way I tell Jody. The movie plays in my head quite graphically over and over again. And when I say the whole thing, I'm talking about the bar itself, being pulled over, the issues, needless to say, this officer justifiably also was very, his adrenaline was high at the time. So that scene wasn't great. I was not resistant, obviously, to anything.
You also have a problem with the song that was playing.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah, Adele, Rolling in the Deep was the song that was playing at the bar that night. So when I hear that, everything, all those things flash back. Phoebe being in the bed, Jody being, again, upset, which you should have been, right?
There's a whole component about this is our relationship, too.
Yeah.
Well, we can get to that, too, or another podcast if you want.
Yeah, but the only thing I wanted to mention about that there were real stories that I'd always heard. I'd always seen the public service announcements and Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and I understood that. I never condoned it. I never thought there was anything. I never thought that I should have been driving that way. But that's not what that's about. It's about the fact that if you've got a problem, whatever it is in your brain, and alcohol does the numbing part, you're not in a position to make any good decisions at that point. And the only way to avoid making those bad decisions is not to put the alcohol in your body in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to, come to grips with. And so there was a Mothers Against Drunk Drivers presentation that I also had to attend. And then I'll tell you about the community service thing in a minute, too. There's just things that stick out in my head. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. There was one lady who got up on the stage and was talking about her husband, who was a truck driver. And, good man, hardworking man. He was 2 days before retiring. And he was hauling whatever load he was hauling back home, and there was a guy in a pickup truck who crossed the center line when he'd been drinking head on. The 18-wheeler went off the road, caught fire, and he died in his cab. Mm-hmm. And they were quite graphic with the photos from the scene. It was very emotional, obviously, when she's telling the story of a gentleman who'd worked his life and was looking forward to his retirement and his grandchildren, and whose life was claimed by a drunk driver. And, again, it resonated with me. It spoke to me. I know that there were people around me who were just doing it because they needed to be there. They were supposed to be there so they could check the box. But there were those who were like me that were just, it touched me. And I figured if I was committing a year of my life to all of these things, I'm not going to waste that time that I'm investing in myself by even mentally entertaining the idea that any part of it was a waste of my time, because it wasn't. The last thing was my community service, which was I was assigned window cleaning at a YMCA, and I had to go twice a week for 3 months, I think is what it was. And I showed up after work, and of course I'm dressed in my dress shirt and dress shoes and all that, going straight from work there. And the guy who was head of maintenance there would just tell me, where to hand me my rags and my cleaning and my little step stool, and I would get up. And these windows were they were 14 feet tall. So part of it I was having to reach with a pole and all that and clean those windows. And I realized that first time that I got up on that ladder to start cleaning those windows, it's like, wow. And everybody's walking by me with their towels around their neck, and they're going to work out. And here I am, cleaning windows, and it was a little humiliating at first, but then it was a ton of think time. Mm-hmm. And
it's almost like they design it that way.
Yeah. But, do you know what? I don't know why this part's going to make me emotional, but I worked hard to make sure those windows were perfectly clean. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, of all things. But anyway, because I felt like I was, paying a debt back, whatever it was. So that year, my point is that year, really, it gripped me. And so, it's still one day at a time, but so many things could have changed. And if there's even a smidge of a flash of a second, and there always will be, when you least expect it, there's going to be that moment of, wow, boy, that would be nice. And I don't know that I would call it a craving or not, but it's just enough that you need to catch it and go, Okay, cool. I get it. Yeah, this is how I'm wired. And then you let it go. It's the same way that I quit smoking. You know, I mean, it's tough. It's very easy to fall into the, well, I could or whatever. So I realized, you know, through that year that I need to accept the fact that there will be a craving in the world, and this is all about choices, whether it's today, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or on my deathbed, that it's always going to be about a choice. Don't fight the craving. Just be intelligent and embrace it. That I am powerless over this, and it's okay to have the thought. It's the decision that I make that is whether, you know, I remain sober or not. And so here we are today, 10 years later, and I'm grateful for that. I don't know what I did to deserve any chance where there was that, what I call much divine intervention, because I could have screwed up a lot of lives that night, a lot of them. And I mean, I'm grateful to that officer. I'm grateful to everybody, because I've, you know, come out of it so far without having anything since then. But anyway, so what were you going to say, Jody?
I don't remember.
Did you have the defensive driving class too?
Yeah, I had that.
Yeah.
And do you know what's crazy about that? I was telling our oldest daughter, Taylor, about this. And by the way, I made sure that I shared all of that with her. She was old enough to know. She was 10 years old, or she was 9 when I had the Safe Start in my car. And I just explained that to her. You know, this is what I did, baby. This is what happens, you know, when somebody, you know, drinks. It can happen to the person who's not an alcoholic too. Realize, right? It's not only alcoholics that get behind the wheel when they shouldn't. But I wanted her to learn that from an early age. And as we've told her this time, you may not wind up with it. This gene runs in the family. I've got cousins. I've got aunts and uncles. My dad, I can point out a lot of people
on my side too.
To show you where this comes from. And it doesn't mean that you'll have it, but you need to be aware of it. And but anyway, so she was in there, and she remembers going with me to the place that would download the photos, and we sat in the waiting room until they, you know, downloaded everything they needed to and reset the camera and put me back on the road again.
What's funny is that at that point we were in that parent mode of driving them all over the place. And at first, when you had that thing in your car, it was like, you need to bring them. I can't bring them. I don't want to explain this. At first, we weren't explaining it to them.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks in, it's kind of like, this is going to be in your car for a while. I need help with these kids. Phoebe's not going to pay attention. She was little, but Taylor was. So that's one reason. It was like, let's just tell her. You decided, I'm going to be honest with her. So that's great.
Yeah. And Phoebe doesn't even remember that.
No.
Well, before you say that, because I almost lost my train of thought there. What I was going to say, it was funny. No, it's okay. In the defensive driving class that you asked about, Sam, and then this is what I told Taylor. I was the oldest guy in that class. Huh. Okay. So I was 40-ish, 41, something like that when this happened. And everybody else in that class was either in college or barely drinking age. Yeah. You know what I mean? 21, 22. And that was another one of those moments that jumped out at me. It's like, okay, so this may be a mistake for these, bad mistake that they shouldn't have made. And
hopefully
maybe they're not alcoholic.
Right.
But if I'm the oldest guy sitting in here, and by this age, this is something that I do, if I decide to repeat that, that's a sign of another problem. I mean, it's just like all of it finally just started flooding to me. When I finally acknowledged that this is not the way that, you know, I'm going to be able to live the rest of my life, it all became apparent. And it does sound trite and cliche to say that admitting that you have a problem, but you really have to get to that place where you're open to it, because you're not going to think about anything that you're not open to. But it was so weird to me. It's like, I'm the oldest dude in here, you know? Mm-hmm. And but anyway, that's what were you about to say, Jody?
No, I was just, there's so much to it. I mean, I want to do another podcast one day with Sam about your story too.
I do
but
too.
There's so much to it. I remember we had a major moment in our marriage 2 days after this happened. Major moment. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You coming out of the bathroom. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
2 days after this happened, and I won't take long because I know we've gone, 2 days after that happened, so this would have been May 10 years ago, and in the 2 days after, our friend brought you home, from being booked and all of that. it was a couple of really rough days. You know, you and I there was a lot of tension and uncertainty between us. Mm-hmm. I remember I had to take, life goes on. I had to take the girls to a birthday party, and it was like at the mall, and he followed me there. And I was like, why are you following me? He was like, I've got to talk to you. And I was like, I can't talk about this now. It was so bad. And then we had the show, and it was a Thursday night that this happened. You missed Friday's show.
I did. There was no way I was too sick to do Friday's
And I was
show.
telling Sam and everybody else here that you were gone. You were out, not here for a different reason. I felt like I was lying and all that. But 2 days later, I was laying on on the bed. Do you remember this? In our little house, our first little house, and you walked out of the bathroom. And in my brain, knowing you, Murphy, like I've known you for all these years, I thought
you know me well.
He is one of the most stubborn people I've ever known, and that's part of your success. I don't say that in a mean way, but you're just a very driven, like whatever you decide to put your mind to, you do. So to me, I didn't see you giving it up. I saw you trying to find a way to drink still.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I can't live like this. I don't want to ever what happened just shook me up. And you walked out of the bathroom, and I was finally open enough to talk to you. And the first thing you said was, I'm going to have to quit drinking. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. I'm going to go talk to somebody, but I am going to stop drinking. And I remember I had the biggest exhale. Like,
you had to put it down your margarita, huh?
I know you don't think I had anything to drink for a long time. But anyway, that was a big moment when you said that. You bring a lot of power to a room. And so for you to just lead with that, I knew you would. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I remember thinking, I certainly know that relapse is possible.
Yeah.
And I do certainly know that it's one day at a time.
It is.
But that was a major moment for us as a family, because I think if you would have, in those few days after that happened, if you would have justified it in any way or said, I'm just going to have beer from now on or whatever, I remember thinking that we're going to be at this place again.
Yeah.
And that I didn't know that I wanted that.
Yeah. So that first day, the first 24 hours afterwards, for one thing, I don't think I'd ever drank any. That's the most I'd ever drank in any one sitting ever in my life.
You were sick.
I was very sick for a couple of days. Type 1 diabetic, that's another thing that, just compounds the problem. All these warning signs. And so that first 24 hours, my brain was playing that game. Mm-hmm. It was wow, this is kind of weird. How did I do that? What can I do to make sure this doesn't happen again, and still drink? And then, of course, then what you just described 48 hours later. And, it's crazy. And Sam, and you probably relate to this too. So in those first days after, when I was, realizing that, choosing not to drink, anytime that I was in a remotely social setting, I can't tell you how many people ask me the question, well, can't you just have a beer or wine? What if you just don't drink the hard alcohol? Which, by the way, was the same rationalization that I had used in years past,
They don't know. They've never been there.
Yeah, and at first,
right?
Oh, my God, that was so difficult. And I know that the whole thing was my responsibility, but I would actually be frustrated with people that were asking me that question. But then I realized it's not their fault, and it's my responsibility anyway. That's why if Jody wants to have a drink, it doesn't matter. It's fine. That's her, not me.
We don't keep it in the house though,
and no one owes me anything. You know what I mean? It's only I can actually, decide whether I'm going to partake or not.
Yeah.
And but it's very misunderstood. It's probably misunderstood because there are some people who just they're not genetically predisposed to it. It's no big deal. You drink socially, not a big deal. Hopefully they make the smart choices not to drive. I think today, thanks to Uber and everything else, it's really funny.
Should be better.
I used to think that too.
When Uber came along, you were like, why?
I know this is incredibly deep, but I realized also it's a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
That Uber and Lyft were not around there for me at that point.
Yeah.
Because I would have not. I would have found another reason to keep drinking.
You found the solution for driving.
Right, exactly.
I can still drink because I found the driving solution.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm so glad you actually finally told your story here. I think it's good for you, and I know it's good for people who will listen and hear this.
Yeah, and I hope it hasn't been like, terribly, and it's a heavy subject. I get that. And it's not something we normally talk about, but it's just something that, today I felt compelled to share. It wasn't that I was ever hiding it from anybody. I'm not ashamed. I want to share the story, honestly, because if it helps somebody, that's great. And honestly, also, every time I share the story, it helps me. Yes. It reinforces. And, the other thing, because Sam, I do want to hear yours. We need to do a podcast.
We don't know yours.
I know.
We don't?
We only know bits and pieces. Right. You never, you always make a joke instead.
Yeah. But mine
involves relapses.
Mm-hmm. That's normal.
Yeah.
Whereas did yours, or did you just, the day it was period?
It's funny. I think I had many relapses 15 years before, just not really realizing that I would try to dial it back. But once I quit, I didn't. But I think that's probably because I'd been through the program. So here's another thing that Jody, it's a great question too. How in the world did I decide to stop having a drink without going to regular AA sessions and all that?
You never did.
But and this is not, I'm certainly not advising that somebody doesn't do that. Here's the reason why. Number one, all of that pretrial stuff that I went through was engaging in that way. There was conversation. There was all of the, everything that was a presentation also was accompanied by a group discussion. Okay, so I experienced that way. The second thing is I'm naturally an expressive person and open to counseling anyway, probably because I'd been through that already with my dad and others. It was not, I don't want to say it was, always easy. At first I was very ashamed, which is natural too. I think you need to feel that feeling at the beginning to kind of give that little kick in the butt to understand this is rock bottom. But anyway, so it looks on the surface like I didn't, quote unquote, go through a program or whatever, but I actually did. It just didn't look like the classic AA. I had been to AA before many times. I had been to Al-Anon before. I've been through Conjoint with my dad before. I've retained a counselor in my life for 15 years for the diabetes and everything else. So it is a program just of a different sort. And look, and it doesn't mean I'm not even. It could be tomorrow that I decide I need to go to one of these, even if it's to help somebody else or just to help myself. Sure. So it's not that I'm not open to it. I think that everybody experiences it a little bit differently. And my dad, I didn't know this until he didn't tell this story until after my mom passed. So many stories that he shared after my mom passed. So when he went through his 23-day, 28-day inpatient program, for the next 18 months, he wound up being a leader of group meetings, voluntarily on his own. That's what he wanted to do. And that was his therapy, to get through it. And he did go to AA and those things, at first. And then after 18 months, he decided that he didn't need that anymore.
Yeah.
Now, and we were worried about that at that time, and, but he never took another drink. But now that I also look at that, I understand he had friends. He had somebody that had gone through it kind of with him a few years before. But that friend, it was a high school buddy of his, that they stayed really close. And so they did have conversation.
Right.
And he was actually a sponsor for a while of some people after he finished the 18 months. I didn't know that either. So he did. So he would talk on the phone. Yeah. And most importantly, my dad, who was an incredibly private, introverted person who never talked about anything, that was the first time in his life where he still didn't talk a whole lot until after my mother passed, but he would share that story. He had no problem sharing that story with anybody, what he went through, one day at a time, what he got. He still has his big book. We found his big book. I mean, he went through a program, right? And there's so many, I guess, misconceptions around that part too. Yeah. And alcoholic.
There's no wrong way to do it. You have to do it your way.
Correct, and that's the whole craziness about it, right? It's very individual. Just like you have to be the one to decide to do it yourself. There are similarities, which is the whole reason for the group thing, but it's still a very personal experience that everybody handles differently. And I think the key is knowing what you need to do for yourself to stay sober. And if that's going to an AA meeting, great. If it's going to AA every day, great. if it's a call
Whatever
to a
it
friend,
takes.
whatever. Right, exactly. It's just going to be different by
Sure.
each individual, person. But, it's easy for me to explain this, but I'm no better than anybody else that's been through this. It's not, what do they say? You're one drink away from relapse. You're one choice away from relapse. And when you go back, by the way, and this is not something I want to try because I find it an interesting psychological concept. But apparently, when you go back, if you take that one more drink, you go right back to where you left off. It's not going to be, oh, great, cool, I'll have another one in a month from now. You go right back to what you were doing before.
You do.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah. You do. For when I did it, because I quit, and we're not going to use mine here, but
I want to do yours.
I do
in a
want to
whole
do your
separate
story.
podcast
Yes,
one day,
absolutely,
Sam.
yeah.
I do.
quit. When I quit twice, it was for months.
Yeah.
And when I got back into it, it's because I convinced myself I could handle this. I quit. I showed myself I could quit. I understand what the problem was. I got this now.
Yeah.
I'll have a beer.
Right.
I'll have 2 beers, 3 beers, and then, yeah, you're right.
You're right
you are
back.
right. I mean, it wasn't like that day I was right back into it,
Right.
but it was like within, it took me 40-something years to get into it, and then the next time it took me a week.
Yeah. Right. I know.
It's so funny. Both of you have always struggled with how explaining, why you don't want, like today when I posted, you don't want to, when you spoke about it in the show, Murphy, like you don't want to celebrate it. You're just, yes, I'm going to mark the day. It is 10 years today, but I can't celebrate it. That's the reason you can't, because if you've admitted you're powerless over something, you just face it every day. It is not something
correct.
to overcome in a grand way.
Exactly.
If you're powerless over it, I guess there's always that, is it fear? There's always that chance, maybe, that you don't want to act like you've conquered.
Well, I think
Right?
humility is an important part of the whole process. In fact, if I'm remembering
big.
correctly, Sam, I think it's one of the 12 steps, right?
Well, admitting you're powerless is one of them,
admitting
right?
powerless,
a big one?
but being humble, somewhere in the mix of those, 12. And see, I mean, I can't recite them all now because it's been a while, but
Interesting.
But you have to remain humble about that. It's not. I haven't conquered anything.
Right, because you feel you would still be powerless over it if it were.
Right.
And
If
plus,
you did that and went there.
If the thought just glimpses or passes into your head, it could be over with right there.
Yeah.
You could say, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is completely different, but I've heard the same thing about suicides. People that sit there and that think about suicide, if they would just get it out of their head, if they could make it through the 5 minutes that they're focused on, I got to do it.
It'll pass. You're saying it'll pass?
I've felt this before. It'll pass. Whether it's you talk yourself out of it or what, a lot of times it's just right there in that moment. If I can just get through the next 30 seconds, not even the next day, the next 30 seconds, and then it's like, okay, now I know why I shouldn't, and boom, you're back on the good path.
Good.
Yeah, it's the impulse. It's understanding that it's the reason that you can't conquer it is because if you could conquer it, you could actually eliminate the problem.
Yeah, but you can make $1 million selling it to everybody.
But you can't. You're not conquering anything because you are.
You just have to face it every
You're
day.
accepting something that you can't change.
Mm-hmm.
Big.
And
That's
so,
big.
and until you accept that, you think you can.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just
Because you've
me.
always done that.
Yeah, it's just me. I'll
Wow.
lay off for a while and then I'll be good.
I will say this. I really, really think that one of the most beautiful things about the two of you and your bromance here, the friendship that you guys have had, I always make fun of it as a bromance, but you have a true friendship, the two of you, is that you share this now. And it's different for you, but you do share it. And when we joke about it on the show, when you guys throw out all these jokes about it, it's you dealing with it together.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny
It's
is
beautiful.
when Sam and I first met, though. I mean, we would even go.
We've shared alcohol.
Oh,
yeah,
I
we
know.
have. We would go do lunch meetings and
I've
we'd have
been there.
beers.
We've shared. I mean, you've been there too, Jody. Some
Lots.
very, very late nights.
Yes. Right.
And early mornings the next
Right.
day.
Yep.
And what's funny is when you and I first met, I don't know, at that time, we didn't know it was a problem for us, but it was like it wasn't. I mean, it
No.
wasn't really, considering how early we get up in the morning to come do what we do, right? It's not like you could be pounding it every single night. However, right, exactly. When it does evolve, it's,
Yeah.
But anyway, so, I'm glad you I'm glad you actually said that, Jody, because now I actually do know why it's not. At first, I thought it was just a pressure is the reason that I can't celebrate it, but it's not something. It's something to reward and acknowledge. Thank God I got through another day, but conquering takes the humility out of it. And the moment that you get the ego and you think that you're in control again, guess what could happen?
What did Scarlett say? Tomorrow's just another day.
Right, exactly. So
it could be tomorrow that something really grabs at you.
So that's why one day at a time is the most brilliant piece of advice, not just for this, but certainly for any sort of addiction, something that you're powerless over. One day at a time is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we won't say congratulations, but I will say that I'm really proud.
You can say congrats.
I'm really proud of you. Obviously, it greatly impacted my life, your decisions, those choices you made. If you had made different choices, we might not be sitting here together talking about this.
Well, and I'm lucky
that it'd be Murphy and Sam, and we'd have another person.
Maybe.
I don't know if I'd have made it. Look, the choice that I made, it's lucky. We're lucky that it's still Murphy, Sam, and Jody, because I don't know that I would have, I don't know that I would have been here. And it's not about me. It's the officer that I almost got into a head-on collision with that really sums the whole thing up.
Could have changed his whole life too.
Yeah. So anyway,
big after the show podcast.
That's 10 years now. Now you know the rest of the story.
And like I always like to say with these is I'll drink to that.
Okay, I knew it.
But I do want to do another podcast.
I know. I want to do
Sam's. So and I promise.
No pressure.
In September will be 4 years for me, so maybe we could do it then.
Okay.
I was gonna say this week, but whatever.
Oh, or this week
when you want.
Well, that's 2 heavy ones in a week.
When you want.
We need to have comedy tomorrow.
Whenever you want. Okay.
Missed any part of the show? Get it all on the Murphy, Sam, and Jody podcast.